Korea, who, by the way, wants to talk. We want to talk also only under the right conditions. Otherwise, we're not talking. We'll see what happens. That's my attitude. We'll see what happens. But something has to be done.
President Trump giving North Korea an ultimatum of ending its nuclear program before any talks between the U.S. and the rogue nation happen. At the very least, put them on the table. Will North Korea ever comply with those circumstances and conditions? We're asking Hudson Institute senior fellow Rebecca Heinrichs that. Rebecca, what happened, do you think, that had North Korea saying to South Korea, tell the U.S. I'm willing to talk?
Well, it's this pressure campaign. There are 450 sanctions that the United States has levied against North Korea. All of these countries are not cooperating with the United States in this pressure campaign, and so they're feeling the squeeze. And so it's gotten to the point now where the North Korea is saying, all right, fine, let's talk. Of course, North Korea at this point isn't willing to say we're going to talk about our nuclear missile program. But again, that's why it's so important that President Trump made that ultimatum, because there's nothing to talk about if they're not willing to talk about the nuclear missile program.
But you know who's not helping, in my humble opinion? South Korea. They told us through diplomatic channels to lower our standards and conditions before we talk. I'm thinking to myself, do they understand what we're trying to do here?
I think they understand. It's just that they're so desperate. They are so desperate for some sort of diplomatic breakthrough. But they need to really seal their resolve, let the United States lead on this, because South Korea is not going to solve the problem. Nobody's going to solve the problem. It's got to be between the United States and North Korea. And the only thing we care about for our national security is that nuclear missile program. And because the North Koreans have now successfully demonstrated an intercontinental ballistic missile that can carry a nuclear warhead to the United States, that is what the Trump administration is rightly focused on.
Right. And now we'll talk about the next phase, which would be additional sanctions, the tightest ever, but not as tight as they could be, because more Chinese companies could be sanctioned. We're talking about interdiction. We've talked about that before. We've done it a couple of times. Do you think we're willing to do it on major powers, let's say like Russia, if they're delivering, maybe illicitly, delivering some type of energy or packages?
I think if we're going to avoid war, we have to be willing to do everything short of that, and it absolutely includes interdiction. I think it does include sanctioning, secondary sanctions, going after Chinese banks, the big bad actors that are continuing to enable North Korea. A lot of that is stopped, but some of it is still going on, and so we do need China's cooperation. China doesn't want war in the North Korean, in North Korea, and we also, I do think, have to be willing to implement a naval blockade before we actually go to, the worst option, but might be the last option, and that is war.
You know what scares South Korea, I believe, and people in the region, is our bloody nose option. But the fact is, there is a plan on the table to do just that. How valuable is that in getting these talks to be productive, if indeed they happen?
Well, I don't think that North Korea would be willing to talk at all if it wasn't feeling the squeeze and if it didn't believe that the United States had a credible military option in its back pocket. So I think it's crucial. President Obama made these veiled threats towards North Korea, but nobody remembers that. Nobody even knew he was doing that because nobody believed him. So I think the fact that President Trump, given his personality, I think that really does, it's really having the effect of convincing North Korea that talks might be its best option, and it's going to have to put its nuclear weapons on the table.
I keep going back to the conversation President Obama, President-elect Trump had when he said, "Oh, your number one priority is going to be North Korea." And I'm thinking to myself, we haven't talked about North Korea for 7 3/4 years, but he basically handed the president a grenade and pulled the pin and said, "You deal with it." Rebecca, we're dealing with it, and so maybe North Korea showing signs they want to come to the table shows we're making progress. Thanks so much for joining us, Rebecca.
Thank you.